Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to bring you a DPS guide for endgame. It's just going to be a quick overview of like gear to keep an eye out for and just how your build should look in the endgame, just for the highest damage output. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. And I do stream over on Twitch. I'll leave my schedule here. And if you're new or returning and you're looking for people to play with, I'll have a link to my Discord down below. We'd love to have you. We will be doing a fresh start character once the servers are up. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the video and have a good day. Other than doing damage, DPS only have to worry about doing mechanics for dungeons or in getting the gatherables in there to make a certain score. That's all you really have to keep an eye out for, but your main focus is just dealing damage. First, I want to cover the artifacts that you're going to be using for some of these builds. It's just going to be a brief overview of what the artifact is, where to get it, and what perk you should be adding. So we'll start with the finisher. You get that from Mantrapala, the Unruled, in Elysian Wilds, and you can add Kelium powered or thwarting strikes to it. Is the Attuned Leather Pants. You get these for finishing the Elysian Wild story quest, the end of the New Eden. And on these, I would either add health or whatever your build is, you can add a weapon specific perk. I go with health just so I can use it for whatever build. The next artifact is Featherweight, and you can get this to drop from Nurmur in the Elysian Wilds. I would either add health or a weapon specific perk. Again, it just depends on your build. If you're only going to use it for one thing, a weapon perk is fine. But if you're going to use it for multiple things, I would generally just go with health. The next one's going to be Venom. This drops from the Siren Queen from the Elite Trial in Reekwater. And for this, I would either add Bleeding Sweep or Skewer. For most builds with this, I would probably go with Bleeding Sweep, though. This isn't really a Skewer Spear. You're going to find on it, it only really works with heavy attacks, and that just doesn't really line up with the Skewer. The next one I want to cover is a new artifact, and it's not actually going to be released at the beginning of the season. This is one of the artifacts of the new raid called the Power Stone. I think it's just maybe it could be a cool offhand to use just for the weekend that it can apply. But it's just a thought, and it does drop from the new raid, like I said, and I would add Crowded Bludgeon to it. The next artifact is the Endless Thirst, and you can get this from Mutated Savage Divide, and I would add Refreshing Toast to it. And onto the Butcher, you get this from Mutated Dynasty, and I would add a gem setting pin to it. The next artifact I want to cover is Freya's, and you can get this from Mutated Genesis, and I would either add a Rogue or Vicious. The next artifact is a Deep Freeze, and you can get this from Mutated Glacial Tarn, and I would add Pylon Burst or Unending Thought to it. The next three are all going to be from the PvP track, so you have no control over when these drop. It's kind of unfortunate, but the Nimble Coat, you get this from the track, and I would add Enchanted Ward. The Pestilence is also from the PvP track, and I would put Plague Splitting Grenades on it. And for the final one is Serenity. It's from the PvP track, and I would add a gem setting pin. The next thing I want to cover is the gems. This will just be really quick. The gems, just make sure you're spec'd correctly for each fight. You know, if you're going into a fire mutation, just make sure you have full fire gems with a fire amulet. Same goes for nature, void, and ice as well. Just make sure you're spec'd correctly to make the fight that much easier for you. Next thing we're going to cover is the consumables. So you're going to want to use a honing stone. So you don't have to use the powerful one if you don't want to. They are kind of expensive. You can use a lower tier, that's just fine. And then you're going to want to use coating and wards depending on whatever you're fighting. You know, if you're fighting corrupted, use corrupted coating and ward. And then you're going to want to use hearty meals before, each activity, just to get a little bit extra regen and stuff. And then Desert Sunrise and Powerful Affliction can be really good based upon, if you're fighting dots or like blight and stuff. And then on your bar itself, you're always going to want to have health pots or regen pots. You can also go with serums, but regen serums are super expensive. And then if you're using healthy toast, I would recommend mana pots. And then new to Season 6, you can actually use Powerful Gemstone Dust and Oak Flesh Balm in tandem with the ward. It won't get rid of your ward now, so if you need extra physical or elemental resistance, you can actually use those as well. Next, we'll cover just certain perks to watch out for on your armor. So for your armor, for PvE specifically, the only thing you really need to watch for is health and Enchanted Ward. Refreshing is pretty nice as well, but Enchanted Ward is definitely a must-have for PvE. It just makes it that much easier. If you're full Enchanted Ward, you're getting 20% less damage from light and heavy attacks, so it's really nice. And then weapon perks also, if you're running like Rapier, you basically have to have Leeching Flurry, and then if you're running either Evade or Bleed Evade, you also need to have Omnidirectional Evade if you're not running it on the weapon itself. So weapon-specific perks are also very important. All right, to cover the jewelry, for the amulets, you're going to want to make sure you have health and whatever protection you need for the mutation, whether it be, void, fire, whatever. But also for certain bosses, you're going to find that Slash Strike Thrust is very useful. And for the third perk, Empowered or Divine is probably best in slot, just depending on what you're doing. Empowered is really good for a lot of things. I would go Empowered unless you're running Nature's Wrath. But I guess that got gutted this season anyway, so you're probably not running that. So just stick with Empowered. For your ring, you're always going to want Hardy. and your damage type. And then ideally, you probably have leeching for PvE just for the extra lifesteal. So if you're running like Rapier, you're going to want hardy, thrust damage, leeching. And for your earring, you're going to want empowering toast and refreshing toast on them. The extra empowering is nice. You can pop a mana pot, get your empowering. And then the refreshing toast just puts everything on off cooldown faster. And then for the third perk, you can either probably look at nimble or refreshing. Nimble's not great, but the refreshing is pretty decent. Next, we'll cover the Heartrunes. So for the Heartrunes, you can go Fire Kick. This one will just cleanse your team of debuffs and give them a power. You can go Vines. Now, Vines will add Weakening and Rend to the enemy. And then Bile is for disease. So if you're in a nature mutation, this is really strong. If you need to just drop disease on a clump so they don't heal as much. And then for Corrupted, you can also run Detonation. Deto's really strong just because it does arcane damage, and Corrupted are also weak to arcane damage. All right, next we're going to cover the actual builds themselves. So we're going to start with the Rapier just because it is the highest damage output build in the game. And there's 3 different ways to run it. You can run it as Evade, Bleed, or Bleed Evade. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. We'll cover those. And if you're running this build, your best artifact in slot is definitely going to be the Nimble Coat. If you don't have it, the Attuned Leather Pants is a pretty good secondary. Now, if you're going for a named option, the new ones are kind of decent. You can do like 1 perk crafts on them. But if you're getting the ones that drop, you can look at the Hoplite one that drops from the Hive of Gorgons. And you can add Omni Evade to it. I will have videos for each of the 3 different builds showing the different stats that you need for the Attuned Leather Pants and the Nimble Coat version, and basically just how they function, adding the 3 bleeds and popping them and whatnot. And so I'll have all 3 of those playing now. And real quick, I just want to highlight the dummy that I'm actually hitting in these scenes. It's up here in Brightwood. I'll leave a marker for where it's at. But this is the best dummy in the game to come test on. It's right next to the shrine. You can just come hit it. If you ever want to like switch your stats from dex, strength, whatever, and just test the numbers, this is the best dummy in the game to do it on. And for this build specifically, you're going to want dex int gear for it. So whatever you're getting, if you get a strength piece, that's really good. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. Make sure your gear is dex int. And the most important part of this, regardless of if you have Nimble Coat or not, you're going to want to have 4 times refreshing. You have to have 4 times refreshing, or if not, your cooldowns are just going to be far too long for it to actually work correctly. All right, next I'll show the attribute split if you're using Nimble Coat or Attuned Leather Pants. Next, I want to cover all the off-hands that you can run with the Rapier. Depending on what you're doing, all these stats are still going to be the same that I just showed. You can run the IG, the VG, the Fire Staff, the Musket, or the Bow. And for all of these, minus the IG, I'll have pictures on screen of the named ones. For all of them, minus the Ice Gauntlet, you're going to want the Hoplites variant from the Hive of Gorgons. And then for the Void Gauntlet, you can add Vicious. For the Fire Staff, you can add Attunement, Flame Attunement. For the Musket, you can add Refreshing Power Shot. And for the Bow, you can add Penetrating Rapid Shot. And then for the Ice Gauntlet, it is the same one called the Duneborn Ice Crawler. And you can add Vicious to it. Next, I'll show the mastery for all of the Rapier builds. So you have your Bleed, your Evade Bleed, and your regular Evade. I'll show all the masteries for them, and then I'll show all the masteries for the offhands as well. Next, we have the Fire Staff tree, followed by the Void Gauntlet tree. Next is the Bow tree. Now we have the Musket skill tree. And finally, we have the Ice Gauntlet mastery. Next, we're going to talk about the Greatsword, specifically the Serenity. It's the best Greatsword in the game, and there's not even one close to it damage-wise, just because of the passive on the Greatsword. But there's many offhands you can run with this. You can run the Bow with it. You can run Hatchet, Great Axe, Sword and Shield, or Musket, just because the Greatsword scales with both Dex and Strength evenly. It's the only weapon that scales evenly with anything, I believe. But it is very strong and very versatile. When looking at gear for this, you're going to want Dex or Strength gear. I'll put a clip here of just clumping the mobs with the Great Axe and just killing them with the Greatsword. That's the usual pairing with it, I would say, unless you're in boss fights where you're going to probably run the Hatchet, just because of the survivability on it. So next for the Greatsword, we're going to look at all of the offhands you can pair with it. And the nice thing about the offhands for the Greatsword is all of these can be found from the Sandworm. So you're looking at the Duneborn Tusk, which is the Greatsword itself if you don't have the Serenity. And I would look to put Attunement on it. And then the Great Axe is the Duneborn Pincer, and I'd put Refreshing Move on it. The Warhammer is the Duneborn Maul, and I would put Trenchant Strikes on it. The hatchet is the Duneborn hook, and this is actually Abyss hatchet, and I'd put attunement or keenly powered on it. And then for the spear, I would put skewer or sweep on it, and for the blunderbuss, I would put vicious on it. The one thing to note is I am running the attuned leather pants for all of these builds. So if you're running Greatsword Spear, Greatsword Hatchet, Greatsword Bow, whatever, I am running attuned leather pants just for the extra stats. Next, we're going over the mastery. So first we have the Greatsword, followed by the Great Axe. Next is the Warhammer. Now we have the Hatchet. Next is the Spear. And finally, we have the Blunderbuss. Since most of these scale off strength, you don't really have to worry about the trees changing too much between like Warhammer, Spear, and stuff. But if you were to run bow or musket with this, I'll have a stat split for that as well. And for the last build, we're moving on to the Spear. This is probably arguably the strongest weapon in the game. Between the Enfeebling on Skewer and the Rend and the Weaken that you can apply with Perforate, you're always going to have this no matter what activity you're doing. You're going to want at least one Skewer Spear. And we've already talked about how strong the Spear is because of this Feebling on Skewer. So you're going to want to have Skewer on your weapon. The other perks you're going to probably want are Vicious and Keenly Jagged. Those are really strong. But you definitely want Skewer on the Spear. And with this build, I would also run attuned leather pants. Now, I'll put the mastery for the Skewer tree up now. But if you're looking to go with the Bleeding Sweep route, which is also very strong, and it's one that I did recommend on the Venom, I'll put the tree up for that as well. It's another strong build. Like if you enjoy running Spear and you already have a Skewer, you do not need two. Starting with the named options for the offhands for the Spear, we have two that come from the Hive of Gorgons, that being the bow and the musket. So for the Hoplite musket, I would add Refreshing Power Shot, and for the Hoplite bow, I would add Penetrating Rapid Shot. And then the other three offhands come from the Sandworm, and for the Hatchet, the Duneborn hook, I would add Attunement or Keenly Empowered. For the Great Axe, the Duneborn Pincer, I would add Refreshing Move, and for the sword, I would add Empowering Whirling Blade. Next, we can cover the offhand masteries for the Spear. So if you're running bow, your tree is going to look like this. If you're running hatchet, you're going to look like this. The Great Axe build will look like this. The sword build will look like this. And finally, the musket tree will look like this. Now, if I'm running the Spear with anything besides the bow or the musket, my stat split's going to look like this, and then I'll have the bow and musket split after this. All right, I just want to say thank you all for watching the video. That is the end of it. This isn't too much of a deep dive into each build. If you want to see more of each build and kind of how it works, you can go over to Twitch and watch me live, or YouTube. I do stream here now too as well. But again, if you enjoyed the video, please like or subscribe. Likes go a long way in pushing this to other people, so I would really appreciate it. And again, if you're looking for a community to join, feel free to join my Discord. It'll be in the link below. Yeah, and I hope everybody has a great day, and bye.